Hi friends, welcome back. This is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and this is the fourth video in the little mini series I'm doing describing very briefly the origin stories of the trump cards and how they may be interpreted differently depending on the deck or not. Across the board, the decks at least that I'm showing have more or less the same meaning, but there are some differences to them. Now, when we get to the 15th card, or the Devil card, I have to note that for card 15 and 16, the Devil and the Tower, these two cards, for whatever reason, did not exist in any of the Visconti Sforza decks across the board. Now, it could be that coincidentally all of those two particular cards from the decks were missing, or it's possible that they just never commissioned these two cards for their decks. So what we have here, and for any other version of the Visconti Sforza decks, we'll have a recreation, an artist's recreation of how they imagined they might have appeared had they appeared in this original deck. However, in the Metelli deck of 1660, there is a Devil card. Now, granted, it's 200 years after the appearance of the Visconti Sforza, but I do believe, let me check, I do believe the Devil also did appear, in fact, in the Rosenwald and the Budapest, also from Italy. And they were contemporary decks to the Visconti Sforza deck here. So let me go pause and pull and see if they existed. Okay, yes, the both the Rosenwald and the this is the Rosenwald and the Budapest had Devil and Tower cards, and I know that this deck is extant, which means there were no missing trump cards from the copies of the Budapest that currently exist from the day when we're going back to the 14 and 1500s for both of them. And there's nothing in the literature I got on the Rosenwald that suggests that these were recreated. So these cards appear to have existed in very soon after this deck came out, if not at the same time. It's just that maybe, I don't know, maybe they felt that these cards or these images were too inappropriate for their genteel lifestyle. I don't know. But by the 1760s, TDM, we have the image of, an ambiguously gendered individual with wings. A reference, it's called the Devil, so there's a reference to the Devil. People tethered to not him directly, but to a weight beneath him, or his pedestal. And you can see that they're taking on characteristics of animals. They have tails, they have animal ears, they have horns. So there could be a suggestion that, this is our carnal our carnal selves, or the thing that we're a slave to, like carnal knowledge or whatever. Now, it's interesting, if you recall, that it falls after the Temperance card. And I think a lot of times you can take your clues as to what a card means if you look at the card that came before it or after it, right? If you don't temper your behavior, or if you don't dilute your actions, you run the risk of excess. Right? You can see that. You can understand, the reference to one card trumping over the other. Always remember, it was a card game. And the card that came after the card before it was the card that trumped the card before it, So if you're, the risk of not, tempering your indulgences, the risk is, overindulgence. And we have a fire and brimstone guy by 1830, by 1860. The Minchiati in the early 1800s. We have a formidable creature with a pitchfork. And as early as 1660, with the Metelli, we also have a winged creature with a pitchfork. So it does seem as though the devil was a creature of the time and probably in other tarot cards of the time, but for whatever reasons, they just don't appear in the Visconti Sforza decks. But when you see the devil, right? I mean, it's like you're in bondage to your vices, right? It comes after the temperance card. You're in bondage to vices. You're in bondage to overindulgence. It could be to a person. It could be to, alcohol. It depends on other cards. And in here, it's really a sense of fire and brimstone, as here. I mean, this was a Bolognese tradition here, this card. So we get the sense of like fire and brimstone. And they really were afraid of hell. I mean, they were reminded of hell every time they went to church, right? So as I mentioned with the devil, the tower did not appear in the Visconti Sforza decks, but in contemporary decks of the time, the Rosenwald and the Budapest, it did. And in both cases, there are no people, there are no individuals present. In the Budapest, there is a sense of maybe lightning, because there does seem to be some kind of expressive line here coming from the heavens, or maybe coming from the tower itself. It's a little bit ambiguous. Here, there is no lightning bolt, but there is a building that does appear to be falling. By the time of, let's touch on the Metelli and the Minchiati. The Minchiati from 1806, 1807 is very interesting. It's a person, maybe Adam and Eve, two people, escaping or leaving or being exiled, maybe from Eden, to escape the flames, right? This could be, this could be a reference to Adam and Eve being exiled, leaving God's garden, leaving God's place. The Metelli of 1660, the person is not leaving any kind of building, but it kind of looks like the person's being struck by lightning if you look, right here. And this card, I've never read it anywhere. This is my own observation. It almost looks as though the person is saying, let me be struck down, with lightning if I'm lying, and indeed he is. That's just my own observation. I've never read it anywhere. I don't know if that's really what it comes from, but that's what it looks like to me. So, here's an example where cards depict, some kind of catastrophic thing, some kind of earth-shattering change in different ways. But by the 1760s, with the conver, we most clearly have a tower apparently being struck by lightning and people falling from it. Now, it could be a reference to the Tower of Babel, like a religious reference. Before vanity comes a fall, because the card before it, remember, is the devil card. And vanity could be one of our, many vices that we have, right? I have always understood this for myself. I never read it anywhere, but I have always, when I see this, I think, before, after vanity comes the fall, or before the fall comes vanity, right? So we have, we're overindulging, and then the next thing that happens is something of great calamity. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily mean that your world is going to end or whatever, but there will be change. It signifies significant change. And my inclination is to believe that it comes after some type of vanity. But I don't think that is, I don't think that that's necessarily the meaning that most people take. Here we have Another Italian rendition with people falling. And then the one that most people are familiar with. So in many of them, including the Rider-Waite-Smith or the Albano-Waite-Smith, the top of the building appears to be like crowned, you know, like it's a crowning achievement, like a, you know, like a very significant achievement or goal that, you know, somebody had these lofty goals. That's another reason why it reminds me of like Pride Comes Before the Fall, right? Because to think like you could achieve greatness, you know, to be close to God, which I guess is what my understanding of the card, and then divine intervention saying, not so fast, not so fast. Okay. Okay, moving right along, and we come to the star card. Now, I believe that the intention of the star card was a reference to Venus, what they would have called the morning star, although it's a planet and not a star, by the 7 rays, right? Venus is characteristically represented by 7, I forget what they're called. Excuse me. You know what the 7 rays are called. It's kind of like the way that it refracts light or whatever it does, right? So this concept of the star, you know, is represented as a virtue or a woman holding the star. I remembered as soon as I got to the star card that this card that we referenced as the Hermit was really the star card, and somehow it kind of looks like it became part of the Hermit image as it maybe moved from other countries or regions or whatever. But when I was looking for the star card of the Metelli deck, which is what this is, I realized that I couldn't place what this card was. But now I just remembered. So here is the star card. Something that happens at night. He's got the lantern. So the combination of this traveler at night with the lantern somehow morphed into what we know as the Hermit. And I'm sorry I didn't recall it, when I was doing the Hermit card. I just couldn't think of it. Okay, so at some point we ended up with the image of a female bending by the banks of water, river, whatever, pouring vessels of water, one onto land perhaps and one onto water. It's a little bit ambiguous. Again, we have 7 stars, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which may be some type of reference to Venus, but then this star is a bit different. Now, why is Venus associated with water? And why is there a water bearer? Why did that, become the quintessential image representing the star card? Well, I've done some research on the topic, and it seems as though in the time of year when Venus appears in the desert region of Africa, Asia, Middle East, not Asia, excuse me, the Middle East, that's when the rains came. So they knew when Venus would appear in that region of the world, that's when the rains came, and that's when irrigation would happen. That's when the need for irrigation would happen, where you would literally fill a jug with water and pour it on the land. Now, maybe something was lost in translation. Maybe people didn't really fully understand what they were seeing as they, reproduce the card. I mean, here she's pouring 2 jugs into the water rather than one, onto the land. And I'm not saying that that's exactly what was happening, right? But that's what I read. Right? It's taking water, that's when the need for irrigation of the land happens, is when Venus appears in the sky over the Middle East. And so that's what I believe is a reference to. Okay, so how do you use that meaning in the card, in a in an interpretation of the cards? Well, it's, a time of plenty, right? It's a time to take advantage of a good opportunity. So it could be an inspirational card, meaning now is a good time to take advantage of conditions, right? That's how I understand the card to mean, given my understanding of when Venus appears in the sky. And how, well, I had, I've told you many times when I've done research on tarot, oftentimes it was a rabbit hole into some other area of study. And in this case, it was the constellations, because I really wanted to understand why the star card of the tarot deck had an association with, apparently, with Aquarius, right? And so the constellation of Aquarius appeared in the sky in the Middle East when the waters came and when the rains came. And so she became associated with rain or the water, right? And then from that point, the concept of taking advantage of the plenty, the abundance of water to water your land. Now, obviously some of these cards don't quite explain that story. And the Metelli doesn't at all. The Metelli just addresses like a nighttime traveler, right? But by the time we get to TDM and the later Italian decks, and certainly Rider-Waite-Smith or Albano-Waite-Smith, we get the concept of the association with Aquarius, the water bearer. Let me pull both the Rosenwald and the Budapest to see how they represented the star cards.